Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button and I'm a granite sculptor. And welcome to video number 21 of the virtual stone carving apprenticeship. Going forward, I did a little bit work on the top of this, on the crown, just to dress off this area over in here, because this front edge was well resolved. In a few minutes we're going to turn this over. We'll consider this to be the joint for right now. We'll level it and we'll make sure that this space is plumb. We probably don't need these brackets. It should stand up just fine without them. And then I'll go ahead and cut the parallel face to this. Make sure that it's level, which will, and this will make it square to this face. If this is plumb and this is level, this will be parallel and be level as well. This is going to be the edge that has the real crumbly portion from the beginning. It was real close to the face, so I may have to go a little bit deeper to resolve that. I'm gonna look at it. I'm not going to show exhaustive video of stuff I've already done. That's already on video. Y'all can go back and study it. I don't know how many people are watching these videos in series and following along. I'd like to think there's at least one or two. I know it's a lot, but the reason I'm showing you these things in order is so that you understand why things are done, how things are done, the order of operations in which they're done, and when one process makes more sense than the other. Doing these other faces, I'm gonna introduce a different approach. And it's the kind of approach that typically I would do if I had to dimension something on a project. As a beginner, you need to be able to do this where we haven't done any particular measuring. It's been a very general approach. And so if this turns out to be, 1 foot 3 1/8 or, 5/8 or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's not like you're dimensioning it to a 1 foot 2 dimension, and you have to be very determined with that. So, but I'll show you new things, like we haven't cut a corner yet, a finished corner. We're going to turn this over and this will be parallel, so we still won't have any corners. But I'm hoping to move through this relatively quickly, because this is a project that is not a long drawn out project. This is something that you should be able to blast through fairly quickly. And if you're a professional, it's just a couple of days to just do it, and go wide open, because you're just not going to get paid to spend months working on something like this. So you should be able to wrap it all up completely within just a couple of days and have a really nice stone. And if you're only doing a small portion of it, it goes really fast. But I'll show you new stuff. I don't know if we'll have, this video will cover all of it. We might have to have one more, but I'm gonna flip this over and get to work, and I'll show you new work as well as whatever it comes up, something new. We'll add it in, but this will hopefully progress a lot faster, at least on video, in real life, because I won't be stopping to take video and talking as much. We're just gonna blow right through it. We're gonna use up some tools and get this done. So let's cut some stone. A couple of things when you're working with your yoke. It's very common to take your belts, if you don't want it to turn, and twist one belt in order to keep it from turning as easy. And a lot of times if you got to choke up, you can lift it right off the pulleys and go up on the hook, as long as your stone isn't going to foul on the yoke. It's important to match your belts so that your seams are together, and then you can adjust them the way you need them to be adjusted. We'll lift this just enough, take these out, and put them aside. But these fixtures, the reason I showed you these fixtures first is because they really work. They're the kind of thing you need to have in your studio. so you can get to work. Watch your belts as you turn it so that your stone doesn't fall out, because see, that's really close. We'll let that down. But see, just looking at this, we've got a lot of stone here, and the soft portion is over in this area. So we'll have to lift this up. A lot of times when you've got a stone, the reason this stone listed so bad when we picked it up is because there's a lot more weight here than there is here. And that means there's a lot more width. So this belt all of a sudden becomes shorter than that belt. We're a full belt in, so it wasn't like the belts were off and it was going to fall out. It's because this one we'd almost need to twist it in order to shorten this belt. So you got to be really careful handling these stones. If you don't have a yoke to turn your stones with, to just roll it, you can rig your stone and you can turn it on the ground. That's why I like having a dirt floor. You put your pads down and everything, turn it on the pads, turn it on some long 2x. But when I have a large stone and I'm turning it in the studio, I have a couple of hoists on my crane, and you don't have to have heavy hoists. I've got one that's a 10 ton, which is too big for my gantry. But I've got a 10 ton and I got a 3 ton, and I can hook the 3 ton on with a separate belt or a sling, and I can very carefully rotate the stone, you know, sliding the belts on the hook if I need to. I can very carefully turn the stone as opposed to having me to get under it and muscle it and try to do it where things go wrong and you get killed. Pope Tucker's a relative of mine up in Vermont. He worked in the quarries. He lost half his foot, pinched it right off. Growing up, he had a plastic half of his foot that he wore in his shoes so he could walk regular. You know, kids, we thought that was kind of cool, but, you know, I don't think he ever thought it was cool. And you get under one of these stones and they'll kill you, or they'll maim you for life. So doing that, you can stand off to the side where, you know, you're not tangled up in the ropes or the belts or the chains, and you can hopefully not get injured. So be very careful. Now I'm just gonna manipulate this and set it down on the bankers, level it up, and we'll get to work. This will be a lot easier because this is going to be like several inches lower, so I'm going to have great leverage. I'll be able to fly on this side. Okay, this is leveled up pretty well. I've got left enough room here at the bottom where it's easy to put the square on to check level. That's why I like that little 6-inch, you know, level with the bubble. Face is pretty good. So we'll get started. But see, it's punky here. This is that bad spot we were talking about where it was really soft. You can see where it's all kind of flaking off. But now that this is up to level, wow, we got to come clear down here and go across. So all of that junk is going to come off because we got to come to at least right here to get down and make sure that we're into sound stone here and go across. So we're going to resolve all that. And instead of taking the bare minimum on this and going through and having this big nasty chunk right on the edge that I've got to finish, I think I'm just going to go down to the bottom of that edge and go right across. So I want to show you a quick way to do it, and something that's more analogous to what you do when you're actually doing this as a job and not as just an exercise. Okay. I'm going to show you a couple ways to address this. All right, stone's level, we know that, we're all good. Now, we can look at this top, and this is a quick way to lay it out. Can decide where I want the level top to be, put my level on, get it level. You got to a support and a support holding it there, and then you press down, then you just put your pencil line on there. Now we know where we're going to cut. We'll clear off this crappy junk here, and we'll be able to start that panel and work it in good. Now, we could also do it like this to lay this on and put a couple more stripes. That's typically how you lay out a panel. You know, if you had to cut a joint on something, you've got to cut these lines. You don't just start digging till you get there. It's got to be maybe 1-2 or 1-4 or whatever square. You have to lay it out and cut it. So what I'll do here to speed this up is I'm going to cut this line with a chisel. I'm going to start it in, and that's a no-go. Boy, you can't go past that line. So when I show you how to square it up, while y'all are practicing, you may just want to cut this until it's square and level and not try to put a determinate line, because a new person quite often will dig on this and bump and knock a big chunk out, and you got to take that whole line back. You're better off to take the minimum until you know you can be bulletproof and never miss. So this is part of working out a position that I talked about. I'm going to cut this in. I'm going to cut a square level place here and a level place over here, and then I'll use my plumb blocks to transfer it to these back corners and then stripe that whole top and take it right off, and it'll go really fast. But you've got to be able to do it bulletproof. Practice approaching that edge and getting it level first on your couple of sides before you just lay a line on there and cut it. But once you start having to do this with jobs, with work, with something that's important, you're going to have to make a specific size and not just a random size or whatever it comes out. And this is how you do it. But you got to be so good that you can cut that line and never touch it. So let's cut stone. By setting up my stone like this, where I've got the long 2x coming out, you got to be careful if you use pressure treated lumber and it's not completely dry. I usually have anything that's a money job, I'll have pads in here. I'll have sauce and fire hose. But this is nothing special, so I can just put it on wood. This is not pressure treated lumber. This is. And if it's got any moisture in it, it can saturate and wet the stone and stain the stone, so you've got to be careful. All my pressure treated is really old. I don't put anything in here that's got any moisture left to it. It's years old before it ever gets to it. Now, having these stick out, it's the way I like to work. I've set my tools right there. You gotta be careful not to set tools down, especially if you got a polish. I'll usually stand up a fire hose or something or have a gap there, because if you throw your chisels down, you can chip. But now I've got this laid out here. I'm going to start in with a 1-inch hand machine. I'm going to take a round chisel. I'm going to go right along that line and set that line in. I'm going to stay above the line. I'm going to try to cut on the top edge of that red line so I can see that line. It'll get worn off by my hands, but I don't want to cut on that line, because you'll dip down the width of that line. That's, you know, about an 1/8, that 8, depending on how sharp your red pencil is. That's a guide. I'm going to cut above that line, and I'm going to try to not go below it, period. But that's my reference. And as long as I don't knock this wedge out in the back, that's still plumb, still level, so I can check my level as I'm going along. So, cut stone. Cut this line the whole way across with my round chisel. I'm going to take my chisel here, and I'm going to go with this ripper against the top edge of that cut and not touch the bottom edge. That's going to help push that edge in really well, and then I'll break it off above that, so that I'm not going to break and have a pull that goes down into my edge, ruins my edge. I got to drop the edge, cut it all over again. You don't want to do that. Go in with your ripper. Or a bush chisel or a 2-blade. You can do it either way. nice that looks. This is pushed in, and it's relatively straight. And then there's a 45 up here. Now what I like to do, I'll go right along this line again and work very straight. And I'll push that up because I want to create, there's two reasons for that. If I push this further back, it's going to have more of a tendency to break up here than to pull down here. And if I cut this in here before I start doing that and I check a line, that creates a stress riser so that when the stone does break, if it pulls, it'll tend to go to that checked line and it'll snap off to keep it from pulling. I want to get away from this edge before I bulk any of this off. And so by doing a couple of courses with a round chisel and then going back in either with a 2-blade or a ripper to do this top edge and get it way back away from this edge, I'll have a really strong edge. You see that edge is pretty straight just to start with. There's a little bit left to axe it to get through that red line, but I'm into stone that's a lot better. It's super soft here. This stuff is junk. So by pushing this back and tipping that upper edge a couple of times, I can have a really good result. Point out, when you're working like this, it's a pretty close quarters. You're in here and you're paying attention. If you have a long chisel, you got 14, 16 inches right there. If you add a quick change to swip your hose around right here, you're going to be even further back. And so if you're happy working like this, and you can control it, great. Go ahead and put your quick release on there. If not, put it back here. If you want to have it changed, you've only got one valve, one hose, put your regular fit in here on the machine, put your coupler back here and snap it on and off back here. It'll last 10 times longer and it'll give you that much more clearance to work. I don't think you should put a clip right here. Now that I've pushed all that off with a chisel, I can take my ripper and I've got a ledge to set on, and I can very carefully push this back in order to have a really nice face right there. I did find my broom. I've been using that other new broom head. It's been driving me crazy. The bristles are so long, they don't work. But it's an old broom that was broken that is free, so that's what I use. This one's nice. It's been worn down over umpteen years. It used to be that long. You can cut the bristles off to a length that makes you happy. This is a pretty good length right in here in this range. Those really long bristles, they aren't. But now I'll push this back, keep my pieces to throw in the bucket, and I'll just push this edge back, and then I can go ahead and put some stripes on it with the saw, break it off very carefully, and I'll have 90% of my panel put together in a matter of just 5-10 minutes. So it's way faster, but you need to do it the way I showed you to learn how to do it, because if you go fast, you succeed fast or you fail fast. And if you're not good at this, you'll destroy this stone 10 times faster if you work at the wrong pace or the wrong method. You need to be good enough to be able to go fast before you go fast. Trust me on this one. You'll be happy you did. Go slow. Little pieces are little mistakes. Just ran some saw cuts across this end. I want to get this level from here to here. I'll do the same thing on this end. I stayed up about a 1/4 inch because breaking a lot off, it'll tend to pull a little bit. And so I don't want to put it right on the surface and then hit it and then it comes off with a great big chunk that digs into my surface. I'd rather put a couple light saw cuts and finish that with a 9-point. But we got these saw cuts, so we're still just a few minutes into this panel. It's going to be all stripped off here, the bulk of it off, in just no time at all. And then we can spend the time getting the panel in there really nice. So time to start cutting these off. Here's my line. See that? I'm not quite a 1/4 inch tall. And that's breaking off pretty nice. Remember, which these sides are both going to break. This should break pretty straight. We thought this was the rift, okay? And then the run is on the other sides here. It's because it shifted, it's sort of parallel, it's sort of racked. So this should break pretty straight. It'll break differently depending on where you're at. And then you get in, you forget about that, and then you get into where you dig. But that's like perfect. That'll break off really nice. Just gonna knock that off. I'll run that down with the other tools, and we'll check the level here in just a second. I'm doing the same thing, developing this, because this is gonna be a corner. This is important. Don't push here. Just blow this off. Work this down with a 9-point. I'm down in there about half the depth. I'm going to take and work this outside. Now I didn't threaten my corner. I'll work this a little bit more here, and then I'll scrape it up. Get this edge off, scrape it up, and that pad should be great. Then once you're pretty close, surface of your 9-point. Take your scraper, pull it right down to that line. By cutting this in, like I showed you, okay, and leaving the width of the pencil line, because this cut doesn't go perfectly square, it angles up a little bit, it functions somewhat like that tip I talk about, putting on your fine lead. And so, by having that there, it's less likely to break as easily. We can work down until we get to that bevel, and then when we tip the bevel can be the width of the pencil line. Everything's great, okay? I'm going to keep working this back, because right now I can see this is still high at the back. Just going to keep working it. But I've barely been here I haven't even been here for 30 minutes yet since we started shooting video. So Seth turned the stone, did all this in just a matter of a few minutes. So this can go really fast once you learn how to do it, but you need to learn how to do it the right way, even if it takes you a long time, so you're competent to go fast. Because if you just try to go fast, you'll make mistakes. That's the way it works. Inventory, I'm going to tell you, you got to see where you're going to go. You got to know where you're going to go, and you got to know how to get there. We know that this is going to be right in this area will be a finished corner, so you got to be careful with this stone here. We also know that this is the thin end on the back side, where that flat panel is with the big gouge in it. We got to get rid of that scratch or crack or whatever it is. So right here on this corner, that's important real estate, because we want to keep as much stone as we possibly can. So we're going to keep that, so that's important too. If you need to, you can draw all over the stone with your red pencil as a warning sign. Don't draw everywhere, because then you'll think everything's the same. But if you've got an important spot like that, you can mark it to stay off it. You have to approach it very carefully, because we really need this corner. Same thing going to be on this bottom edge, because that's where the stone is going to meet. We're going to end up cutting a triangle off. It'll be thick here, but it'll taper down to nothing on this back face. So you got to think ahead, because you'll go and flog away and say, oh, it's okay, I'm not worried about it. And then you find out you put a big ding in it. Everything's got to go down a 1/4 inch or whatever to catch up for it. So see, this is just, I've been down here for 30 minutes. We got all that cut off, roughed into shape, and it's not done yet, but it's pretty close. I could waste all this off, but I'm going to do these two, then I'm going to do these two, and then I'll go ahead and open the middle up, just saw it across like this, because I'll have an idea on where I'm going, and then I'll go ahead and I'll work it right around the circle till the middle's done, just like always. So I won't waste a lot of time showing you that, because you already know how to do it if you've been paying attention. Watch the other videos. Setting it in like this is how you do it if you've got a project and you've got to put a specific dimension element on it. is that you put your lines on, cut the lines in, and then do it. But you got to be able to work it in from a rough angle, a rough surface. And that's why in the beginning, if all you pay attention to are the bubbles and level and square, that's really critical. You really need to do that and not get distracted by actual dimensions, because you got to be able to do that first before you can ever produce a dimension accurately. Okay, that's 2 hours. I've got roughly just at 2 hours. Got these close. This is pretty much on the money, and I just got to strip that off. But that's how fast you can clean this all off once you get some reference, get the bulk off. And now I'm going to go and work with a hand machine and go a little slower and just corner, 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 corner. Get this all pulled down. And this still is a little bit high, so I can get everything resolved really well. I got a little tip right here, but I have this panel. We'll just keep going on it. I'm going to do this one, finish it this afternoon. So that's what 2 hours will do from that rough stone that we started with, straw line, and cut it right off. And I'm not necessarily going wide open crazy, so I do these panels pretty fast. Okay, I still got a little bit of crown through here to resolve. This edge is pretty much finished, and so I'm going to carefully work it back and get it close. And but that's side number 3 is wrapped up. So it's the end of the day. It's I've been down here. Best I can figure, I've got around 3 hours in everything I've done. 3.5 hours in these in this side here. And I'm tired. I'm down to the end where I've got to do the fine detail to get this panel tuned up, so I'll do that in the morning when I'm pretty fresh. There is one pretty good pick here in the back where it was sawed and polished, and it isn't like a crystal fracture that just fell right out. And that's what I was talking about. When you saw a stone, a lot of times, and then they polish it and everything, where it saws, it can cause a weakness, and when you go back to work on that edge, it just falls apart. So we're gonna cut that off, come down in here. This will be about an 08 piece when I get done. So you gotta take about this much off the end, but that's a good example of how things can fall apart on a sawed, polished edge. You just gotta be really careful. So, but I'll get this all tuned up and wrap up this little bit of crown here, and it's great, but the corners are nice and level, right here to here, looking at where I'm gonna have to come in to clean everything off, and I think we're gonna be good. So, wrap this video up. My name's Clint Button here at Carolina Sculpture Studio. I'm a granite sculptor with a virtual stone carving apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.